Hey there, my name is Cole Adams, and you are watching the best college basketball podcast out there that covers the entire sport of college basketball, brackets, bubbles, and bid stealers. Now, here are your hosts, Sam Fetterman and Jonathan Lidskin.
Season 6, episode 11 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. That is Jonathan. Jonathan, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, Sam. Long day of, being in basketball gyms, but now we get to sit down and talk more basketball. So I can't complain.
Let's talk ball. We're doing 3 tip-off talks today. Tip-off talk is our season preview series, team preview series that we started off last week. We have done 3 so far. We have 3 more coming today. And we've got Henry Sklar to preview the Alabama Crimson Tide. Sklar, how are you?
I'm good. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to talk some Alabama basketball today.
So, Alabama makes the Elite Eight last season, goes from one of the greatest performances ever in the Sweet 16, lays an egg against a really, really, really good Duke team in that Elite Eight. Now loses Mark Sears, loses Cliff Amore, loses Grant Nelson, loses Chris Youngblood, loses Moti Abate, loses Jaron Stevenson, Darian Reed. That's a lot of guys to lose, but there's still a bunch of guys coming back to this team that can take steps forward in my eyes. And I look at Alabama, this team this year, they're going to go as far as that backcourt of Aiden Holloway and LeBaron Philon will take them. Jonathan Sklar, do you guys agree?
Sort of. Henry, you can go first.
Okay. Well, I think it's actually an interesting discussion to open us off there. You kind of started us off hot because I think with the return of LeBaron Philon, I definitely see a world out there where I do think Aiden Holloway is going to start the season in the starting lineup at that 2 spot in the backcourt alongside LeBaron Philon. But honestly, I think that Aiden Holloway really excelled off the bench last year as a 6th man for Alabama, of course, coming over from Auburn after some struggles during his freshman season and really found his shot under Nate Oates like we've seen a lot of players have. And he was just really a spark plug for Alabama. Nate Oates, he talked a lot about having a short leash on guys. If you make one stupid turnover or one bad mistake, then they're going to send you to the bench. And having Aiden Holloway as the guy who could check in when, Mark Sears or other guards made mistakes was really valuable. And Latrell Wrightsell is coming back. I mean, he was a guy, he averaged 10.6 points per game, almost 4 assists before he got injured, had an Achilles injury earlier in the season. But they've said he's ahead of schedule coming back. He's a really good 3-point shooter. And yeah, I think I would love to see Wrightsell back in the starting lineup eventually and Holloway potentially coming off the bench.
I think there's a world where you can start all 3 of them. I know you'd be small in the backcourt, but you have size at the 4 and you have good size at the 4 and the 5, and you'll still be able to space the floor, and you'll be able to space the floor and shoot at an incredibly high level with Wrightsell, Holloway, and Philon together. You obviously don't have to play them together for that many minutes. You have options in that backcourt. Jaleel Bethea being one of them that we'll get into, but Holloway was so much more comfortable last season for Alabama than he looked for Auburn. But he's always been a guy that can go out there and get a bucket. He was much more consistent last year. He was a guy that you could rely on for most of the season to give you good production. And I think that another year in the system, second-year transfer, he can take a decent leap and be one of the better off guards. I know a little bit undersized for an off guard, but especially in this league, but he can be one of the best offensive combo guards, offensive 2 guards in this conference with the way that he shoots the ball and how well he scored inside the arc as well last year. And Philon kind of provides you some of that size that you don't get from Holloway. I mean, he's a 6'4" guard. He's a little bit slim. Hopefully, for Alabama's sake, he can put on a little bit of strength. Probably you don't want too much because you don't want to lose some of the burst, but was tremendous on both sides of the ball last year. Tailor-made to fit in and be Alabama's point guard for this season. was a huge coup when they were able to bring him back from the draft. I thought that he would be a first-round pick for sure. But Alabama gets the guy who was probably the best defender in their backcourt and a key offensive piece back who will leap and be one of the best players in the SEC this coming year. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think so. We know Alabama at this point under Nate Oates is always going to have guards that score. Like you can go back to Early and Jaden Shackelford, like the original group that went to the Sweet 16 in 2021. But we know that they're always going to score. I think this guard group specifically is going to look a little bit different in how they operate from last year, just because I don't think any of these guys are going to be like a 27% usage guy like Mark Sears was. Like LeBaron Philon is a great playmaker, but I don't think he's going to share this like super heavy load on offense. I would be like pretty surprised if he wasn't higher than like a 23%, 24% usage guy, which like I think their offense will be efficient either way. But there's I think more mouths to feed now, and that you don't have like a Mark Sears who I don't want to call him a generational college guard, but in terms of like a guy that can go get a bucket that isn't like super projectable to the next level, like he's about as close as that gets. And so, you guys talked about it. You have Philon coming back. You have Holloway, who's a dead-eye shooter, really can score the basketball. And then Latrell Wrightsell, who at Bama has never been like a super high usage player, but one of the more efficient guards in the entire country. So, yeah, like you have a lot of mouths to feed here. I have no doubt that Nate Oates is going to make it work. But Sam, if you want to move on to something else, I actually think
I just did want to mention in the about almost 400 possessions that Philon and Holloway played together last year without Sears on the floor, according to Hoop Explorer here. Alabama's effective field goal percentage was 62.4 in those possessions. There's some shooting luck there. 42.2% is pretty crazy from 3. 60% inside the arc is pretty crazy. But this is an offense that will still be humming with Philon and Holloway in the backcourt together. And I did want also, Sklar, to kind of get your thoughts on what Jaleel Bethea can bring to the table. Is he the next guy to find his shot in the Nate Oates backcourt?
Yeah, it's tough to say, of course, just because, I wish I could be in Tuscaloosa at these practice runs that they had this past week. I'm just not there. And I just haven't seen it from Bethea yet. But, from what we know about him, he was a 5-star guy coming out of high school, like really projectable to the NBA. And he struggled, like he had some struggles at Miami. His coach retired, 6 weeks into the season. He only averaged
struggling before that too.
Yeah, I believe it was like 7 points. The situation was just not great at Miami for him. And I think we've seen it before with guards coming to Alabama. The pressure is going to be off him a little bit. Like, I feel like you can go cut on a Miami game, and the gravity that Bethea had on him, just because he was one of their most talented players on that roster, was immense. And coming to Alabama, when you have to worry about guys like LeBaron Philon, who has a really good layup package, Latrell Wrightsell and Aiden Holloway, who can knock down the 3 ball, and then even guys in the front court like Taylor Bowen coming in, Aiden Sherrill, who can stretch the floor. The gravity on Bethea is going to be less, and I think what he brings in terms of his length and athleticism is really well suited for Nate Oates' system, and I would love to see him start early on in the season. Like, I would love to see what he can bring at the 3 spot potentially if they do run a 3-guard lineup.
I don't know about Bethea as a defender. I just think that overall Alabama's defensive backcourt is probably going to struggle in ways. Obviously, Philon is great on that side of the ball, but the rest of that backcourt, I'm not exactly too enthused about defensively. But if you can get him shooting the ball, Bethea is a guy that in high school, in grassroots ball, you had to guard him wherever he was across half court, because he would pull up from anywhere.
What was it? He was averaging, I was looking at it just before, what was it, like 80% from the field in high school, like shooting the ball or something? I don't know what stat I was looking at, but I saw something crazy like that.
He had some ridiculous outside shooting performances when he was playing grassroots ball. Jonathan, I kind of steered the conversation in another direction. Do you have anything to add there, or do you want to move on?
No, I just think that, you mentioned the high school stuff with Bethia, how he had some crazy scoring games. I think right now, like, the thing for him is he just has to learn how to play within a system. Like, he kind of got free reign in high school, and you get to Miami, playing high major basketball where guys are bigger, guys are more physical, guys are faster, and Nigel Pack goes down 9 games into the season. All of a sudden, who's taking the bulk of the shots for that team? So yeah, it was a really bad situation, and not to absolve him of blame, but I do think that he has to learn how to play on a good team where he's maybe not the best guy and he's not always going to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you want to move on and talk about the front court?
Yeah, so my thing with Alabama has always been that, like, I think their guards can score, and like that's always going to be the case. I think where Nate Oates has gotten the most out of his teams is when he's had rim protection inside and length on the interior. Like, I think back to 2 years ago, that team really had no rim protector. They were playing Grant Nelson and Jaron Stevenson like a split role at the 5, and teams kind of scored at will on them inside. Then they go and add Cliff. Problem solved, right? Alabama's defense shoots up in pretty much every defensive rim protection metric imaginable, and Cliff had an outstanding year for them. This year, like, if Sherrell gets better, they have Taylor Bowen inside, Noah Williamson. Sam, I know you like, is like a really good backup big in this league. Like, I think with some development here from a couple of these guys, they could be in a really good situation in the front court.
I think they do have. There are questions for sure. Sherrell was not a great rim defender last year. He had just a block rate of just 2%, 5.8 fouls per 40. So those numbers are going to have to get better, as will his free throw shooting. He shot 46% from the line. If that's going to happen again, then it's going to be a lot easier to guard Alabama, knowing that you can kind of just you can just foul him if he gets the ball, and you don't really have to worry about him. And he's also not much of a passer out of the post at this point, so you don't really have to worry about that. But I do think he can take steps forward, because by the end of the year, I thought he was playing some better ball. He was good for stretches in that game against Duke. He was good for stretches in that game against BYU. I do think the outside shooting can come along, and so can the foul shooting. He made a couple threes in that Duke game, made a couple threes in that BYU game. I don't think he's going to be any sort of sniper, but I do think there's potential with his outside shot. I think the key is going to come down to his ability to defend the rim, and I think there's also a reason why they brought in Taylor Bowen and why they brought in Noah Williamson to help with that. I mean, Bowen is a very athletic player that can shoot the three, that can block shots, kind of a vertical spacer on the defensive end, very impactful in terms of blocking shots, although he's still a very raw player as a whole. Maybe in year 3 at the college level, moving up to playing for Alabama, playing for Nate Oates, a different system, a more structured team at this point, because Florida State I was not very impressed watching the way that they went about things. I kind of just thought they had a bunch of guys that did a couple things really well, and they were able to win 8 games in a bad ACC because of it. I think Bowen, if you can get him to shoot and block shots in this Alabama system, will be really productive per minute basis. And you'll also get Noah Williamson as a guy who can be a guy who can stretch the floor, and a guy who's a really big body in the low post.
You know how, like, there are some guys that you, like, swear can shoot even if the numbers, like, don't look great? Like, that's me with Aiden Sherrell. Like,
I wonder if it's because he made 2 threes in the first half against your favorite team in the NCAA.
Like no. Even watching the high school tape, like he was confidently stepping out there and taking them. Like I swear he's a better shooter than the numbers say.
Yeah, the foul shooting was a bigger problem than the outside shooting was.
Yeah, which is very strange.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk about it. I honestly think, not to put a lot of pressure on him, but I think you can make the point that Alabama's ceiling this year might go as far as Aiden Sherrill goes, because I feel like we kind of know what we're getting in the backcourt, like we talked about with LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway, and even Jaleel Bethea coming in. We know where his ceiling is, and Latrell Wright's coming back, but I really don't know. I mean, Aiden Sherrill can turn into like if he hits his ceiling, he can be like an all ICC guy, which is crazy to say, but it's true. So far this offseason, people in our Alabama circles have been saying that he slimmed down like 10 to 15 pounds and has looked that he's adding muscle. The one thing I noticed watching him last year in every game is that I think his conditioning was a little rough. I mean, as a freshman, that's not really unusual, but I think improving his conditioning and, like you guys said, like improving defensively and becoming a more consistent and better rebounder, he can really become an anchor for the front court. And he shot, it was 4 for 6 in Alabama's last 2 NCAA tournament games from deep. So he has that stretch potential. He was a McDonald's All-American guy. Like, he's a player with a really high ceiling. And then to hit on Taylor Bowen, I mean, I think that this is your replacement for Grant Nelson, of course, but I think he honestly might end up being better than Grant Nelson just due to his athleticism and his shooting. He shot 41% from beyond the arc last year. Like, he's not going to do that again, but like, that's pretty, like, even if he shoots 35%, like 36%, like that's still really, really good. And I think the thing about Grant Nelson that was rough last year is I feel like he was dealing with some injuries throughout the season, and it just seems like his confidence was a big hit. Grant Nelson did not look like the same player last year that he did against North Carolina in that tournament run 2 years ago. Like, he was hesitating on deep shots. He was like just rim running and taking these contested layups that were just obviously bad shots. And I just don't think it was the Grant Nelson that Alabama expected. Maybe it's not all of his fault, but I think Taylor Bowen coming in and being that replacement for him can end up being an improvement in Natos' scheme. And it should be interesting. Noah Williamson, I know Sam could probably talk more about him. I mean, he was the Patriot League Player of the Year. What is he? He's over 7 foot. He's a super tall guy. Yeah, 7 foot. One thing I've heard about him is his conditioning and defensive effort so far at Alabama's practices have been a little questionable, but I mean, I feel like there's a big step up between Patriot League and SEC conditioning. So
at the athleticism, it's a totally different world.
Yeah, so that'll be an adjustment for sure. But at the very least, I feel like you have a guy who can come off the bench and snag rebounds for you. So, I mean, that's not the worst thing.
And stretch the floor.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to hit on Keaton Bristow from Tarleton. I'm not exactly sure like what he's going to bring, but the on-off numbers at Tarleton last year, like they were really, really bad when he wasn't on the floor, and they were just pretty bad when he was on the floor. And just another athletic wing forward, bigger. He was kind of more of a 4-5 at Tarleton. He's probably more of a 3-4.
For what it's worth, our sources have said that Keaton Bristow has been a pleasant surprise so far. They said his shooting stroke has been super smooth, and like essentially he's going to be taking over that Jaren Stevenson role. He offers length, and he can shoot the ball. Hopefully, he's a little better than Jaren Stevenson, but yeah,
was top 10 in the WAC in both block percentage and steal percentage last year. So wait, no, he was 18th in steal percentage, not top 10, but he was 10th in block rate in the WAC, 18th in steal rate in the WAC, which is pretty impressive, especially doing that as a freshman last season. And then the incoming freshman class for Alabama, London Jemison, Amari Allen, and Davion Hannah. What level of contribution do you expect from that group? Quickly?
Honestly, I don't know if there's going to be like a LeBaron Philon like guy who plays as good. I think I like London Jemison a lot. I mean, he rose a lot late in the recruiting cycle. I believe he was like a top 50 guy by the end, and like that's the same range as guys that's the same range that LeBaron was in just a year ago, and other guys like Rylan Griffin and Josh Primo were in. So like that's a pretty good place to be. I mean, he's 6'9", he's versatile, he's super athletic, and he's improved over time a lot as a shooter. But I don't know if there's going to be a really high volume freshman on this roster, just because, like we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of mouths to feed. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. Like, of course, we saw Aiden Sherrill work his way into the rotation late in the season, and his minutes went up. So potentially something else like that can happen. And I mean, you never know with injuries either, but I'm a big fan of London Jemison.
I like Jemison a lot as well. Just every time I watched St. Thomas More last couple of years on film for whoever it was, whether it was Jemison or someone else, I was like, yeah, this guy, like, I can see it. He's a really good, he's got great size for a wing. He can hit shots. He can really put some pressure on the basket. I like Jemison as a different dose in the lineup for Alabama. I just don't know how much playing time he's going to get, especially if Bristow, as you said, is a pleasant surprise.
And another guy, I don't want to end off without mentioning it, but another guy that we hadn't talked about at all, I think, is Houston Millette. He redshirted last year, obviously transferring over from Pepperdine. He was a pretty good 3-point shooter for them, and last year he spent the year just soaking in the system. I mean, that guy, he has a great personality. Like, he's super down to earth. From what I've seen to him, he's always taking notes at every game. Like he was sitting at the end of the bench for Alabama, obviously not in uniform, but like he was always there for his teammates, and he was pretty involved with the process, I believe, still. So that's another name to keep in mind. He'll definitely be a guy off the bench who is going to be someone to look out for.
All right, Sklar, very quickly before we go, what would a successful season for Alabama look like next year?
You know, I feel like the floor of this team is a lot lower than last year's, but the ceiling is, I mean, it's arguably around the same. Obviously, you know, it's been a fun last 2 years. You know, the Mark Sears era has come to an end, so we really don't know until we'll see. I mean, I think getting LeBaron back is the key in all of this. The vibes, I wouldn't say the vibes were bad, but they were just kind of meh. And then LeBaron, that happens, and all of a sudden people are putting Alabama back in like a top 4 seed conversation. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of a wait and see thing, but I think getting to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament is a very obtainable goal that they should be shooting for. And anything after that is like super impressive.
All right, Jonathan, anything else to add before you take us home?
Yeah, just to touch on the freshmen real quick. I think, you know, if I had to bet on one of these 3 guys being a, you know, pretty significant contributor to this team, it would probably be London Jemison, just because of how he projects defensively. Like, I think Davion Hannah's probably the most ready of the 3, but he's also, you know, stuck behind all those guards in the backcourt. And then I think Amari Allen's good, but like still somewhat of a project. But, you know, like Sam, like I think Jemison is like what people wanted like Dylan Mitchell to be as a player.
Interesting.
Like really good frame, athleticism off the charts, you know, but Jemison's like, you know, actual skill has come along much further than like Mitchell's was at this point.
All right, Jonathan, you want to take us home?
Yeah. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he works, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about, Sam, help me out here. I don't have one.
Keaton Bristow.
Keaton Bristow and Tarleton State, Billy Gillespie, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This has been Season 6, Episode 11 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. We'll see you in about 35 minutes.